he is the lead, but he's not like a serious whatever. Or
Right.
Burn After Reading. He's hilarious.
Yeah, he was great in that.
Not something I've seen.
You know what I have seen, though? This podcast. Welcome to While We Weren't Recording.
Okay.
The show where we talk about anything and everything except the Dresden Files.
And sometimes
today we're talking about Aeronaut's Windlass, part 500
and
7.
Yeah.
Who gave him system admin access?
Not me.
Take it away, Alex.
Yeah,
You guys keep using that word. I don't think that word means what you think that means.
Listen, I tell my friend all the time that he knows how to source code, so can he help me with this problem? And it drives him insane.
I bet. Oh, man. Yeah.
Okay, guess we're ready to start quickly today.
Are you sure?
Right.
It sounds like you're unprepared this time. Would you like us to ramble? We can talk more about how Sweden's
more
gonna survive.
digressions, and then everyone just got quiet. It's like you're ready to pay attention.
Well,
That's
because
amazing.
Andreas cut us off early with his intro. He was very excited.
Yes.
All right. We are starting, I guess, chapter 57 at 80% through this book. 80%. We're finally getting
We're
somewhere.
80%. That's really good for us, actually.
Yeah,
I was going to say, we got like less than 3 episodes of this left, I think, maybe.
Yeah. There's a chance.
All right.
Tell me there's a chance.
So you can see that the build up to the final showdown is starting, and Espira is running around Habba Landing with his people. He has about 350 men left, maybe a little bit less, and they are about to set fire to Habba Landing. They have fuses, incendiary fuses that they are lighting up, and this is a moment as they're running around that a 14-year-old boy kind of jumps out from the darkness, and Espira stabs him through the heart and kills him really quickly, and is haunts him for the rest of his life. Let's see. So they had gone to the Great Library. Cavendish, wounded, but still has a gigantic book and is reading it. Doesn't pay attention to anything else. She's in a combat area, but she's as serene as if she's in a reading room and just entirely focused on this one book. Okay. All right. The incendiaries are a hellish mixture of fire oil, fire powder, and sticky jelly that would explode and then cling to almost anything. And since Hab Landing's entirely of very expensive wood. And Cyriaco describes that the sun is coming up. So the air on the east side of the tower is going to warm up, and it's going to start moving, and it's going to create a chimney effect, but sideways. So it's going to draw the fire from the west to the east and just destroy everything in its path.
One of the greatest details in this book, in my opinion, because it's like they have open air ventilation that creatures sometimes crawl into. And he took a moment to just be like, oh, by the way, physics. And, sure, we're steampunk and we're doing all of this stuff, but let's take account to what the sun rising is going to do to this thing and how that factors into their plan in their attack. It's such a great, minor but major detail,
Absolutely. It's one of those minor details that make the rest of the world feel very, very real.
Right.
That thermodynamics still functions unless it's explicitly said that it doesn't.
Sure.
So, because now everything is set to explode with the fuses ready at 60 seconds, Espira needs to go talk to Cavendish and tell her to start moving away from the explosion area. And she nearly kills him when he interrupts her reading the book, and her eye is twitching in a very menacing way. But he is polite and says, would you please kindly move out of the blast radius? And so she is forced to not kill him. And then she says,
again.
Right. But she doesn't actually hate him, or at least she says this thing of course, Colonel. And he says, I beg your pardon, ma'am, but I am a major. And she's not after today. He will be a colonel. And Espira has his own ambition. And so he has this both it's terrifying, but it's exciting for him to get such a big promotion so soon, because he's I think it remarks that he's really young for that kind of rank. But to be able to get the promotion, he needs to get back home and to that he needs to kill hundreds of people and have a landing, and he's trying not to feel guilty about
She
it.
did say he was going to get promoted. She didn't say if he was going to survive to get the rank.
Yep, posthumous
Also true.
promotions work.
Hmm.
All right. And then chapter 58, go back to Gwendolyn, who is having an education from Journeyman. Because unfortunately, he gets results. He doesn't do it following the book, but he's getting results. But they are finessing the Hazlitt cage again. They're engaging the power core and seeing what happens. And Journeyman says, well, now, that doesn't look completely terrible.
I mean, keep in mind, we're going to find out soon anyway, but it is going to take him like 2 years to finish tuning the thing. So,
yeah. Yeah. It's like Gwen looks at the readings and says, they're perfect, all well within tolerance. It's like, within tolerance is not good enough for my Pretty. Right. But before they start fighting more about that, Gwen hears something and orders people to be quiet. And then like everyone follows her order because she's a Lancaster. And she hears that there's the howl of discharging gauntlets. And that's not good. They're just in the port on the air deck ship. So they really shouldn't be hearing any kind of conflict. Right. And when they go up on top and look, they see the Auroran Marines leaving and getting into a ship.
a black ship.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And in fact, they get into the Mist Shark, which is Captain Ransom, which is Grimm's current estranged wife.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. They are still technically married, apparently.
Technically.
So,
not that either one of them seems to give a shit about it.
Right.
So Mist Shark is casting off and leaving. And then as it's leaving, they start firing upon the port and the ship. All of the rest of the ships. Yeah. The others are, before they're getting onto the Mist Shark, they're setting charges in places against casks. And so all of the wood gets set on fire as well while the Mist Shark is still moving. They have to get the lift crystal back online on the Predator to be able to survive before they just fall out of the sky to their death to the ground. But they also have to get their shroud up if they want to survive, as the Mist Shark is firing at all of the ships in the row.
Meanwhile, everything is on fire. We're about to.
Yeah. And speaking of being on fire, Benedict has run straight into the fire at the Temple of the Way, chapter 59. And Bridget is trying to follow and help. And she still feels embarrassed about like tripping in front of him or something when she's also trying to save his life. But as worried as she is about her hair, she realizes that worrying about how funny she would look bald is just her way of coping with the fact that she can't focus on how terrifying the rest of the situation is.
She's got a ready-made hat that walks around too.
Yeah. He would just have a higher seat now.
So he basically does all the thinking for her anyway. He's right there.
True.
But it's easy for her to get lost. But Benedict is yelling at her to stay on the path as they go through this maze of a temple. I bet they regret not having straight lines now. And they find Brother Vincent, who he's partially on fire, but also one of the heavy bookcases fell on him and basically crushed some very important body parts that he cannot move. And Benedict is trying to save him and get him out from under and save him in general. But Vincent just keeps trying to say, leave me and take this thing. He saved one of the books. Apparently one of the copies of the most important book that was worth burning down the rest of the temple and the Habel for.
Listen, 50 Shades is a very popular series, and we shouldn't fault people for wanting to save it for posterity.
Right. I mean, not spoilers on some level. So like plug your ears and la 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 if you really don't want to hear it. But like we're in book 2 and we still don't know
Yeah,
entirely what that
it
book
doesn't
is
really
and why
come up.
it was important.
The-
Yeah.
Only her transcribing it or something. No, wait, that's the end of book 1. It does it even
Yeah.
come up as a subject?
No, I don't
Oh.
think it does at all. And like as near as I gathered, it seemed to be like they'd mentioned, right? Like it's a registry of names or something like that. And so it's
Yeah.
like
So
Maybe it's
if
a
it turns-
census, maybe it's a list of potentials type thing.
well, and that's what I'm thinking is it's like the chosen one's family, lineage is here. And if that's the case, then these 2 books are like the biggest prologue in freaking history. That it's like book 3 starts out with a boy on his farm, and it's like, like
we have a girl in a
holy crap.
battery. Is that close enough?
Sure, thank you. Bridget is the chosen one. Oh man. Oh no.
First of all, Raoul is the chosen one. Let's get it very clear.
Obviously he thinks so, but I was just thinking how Tavi like she is right now, and it just got worse. So yeah.
I mean, it's the same author.
Right. He uses the tropes because they work,
They do work.
So, yeah.
All right. So Benedict is confused, like, why is this book? He wants to just take Vincent out with the book and save both of them. But Vincent describes it is what they came for, and he calls it the index. He doesn't describe of what.
He's a little on fire and being crushed to death, so I think we're going to forgive him. But...
Yeah. And
like, ironically, is it the index of this library, which is now on fire, and therefore the index is useless? But like I said, giving him all the grace in the world right now. So
yeah, he's very calm as he's in immense pain and facing his impending death. He says to Benedict that death is just one more path, one you'll come to in time. And don't let your pain choose your way for you. You're a better man then. And he's dead. Heartbreaking week just for Benedict. And then as Bridget's trying to get Benedict up and out of the temple that's still on fire, is right when he collapses because he's been bit by the silk weavers several times, and even warrior-born metabolism is going to fail at some point. And now he is unconscious and poisoned in a temple that's on fire, and she has to try to get both of them out.
While he's only like twice her size and muscle dense, and
maybe not twice, because Bridget herself is very large, and because of the battery, farm girl's super strength, she is strong enough to carry him, but he is sizable.
Yes, that's fair. It's also a lot harder to carry a limp body, So
yeah. But she can get him over one shoulder and starts staggering towards the exit, realizes she forgot the book that Vincent just died to give them, and then hobbles backwards to get the book and have book in one arm and Benedict on the other, and runs straight into an Auroran Marine. That
is what happens when you're not a reader. You just don't pay attention.
Yeah. And then after she blinks at him, like, what's happening? And they have to fight. The man had been wounded. There was blood on his tunic and more on his leg. But he's staring at her blearily. And then they have to start struggling over one of the blades. And then she has to kill him. Yeah. So in the middle of the temple that's on fire and smoke that's too thick to breathe in, I think she slams his head into the ground a lot, and then eventually he dies enough that she can hobble away with Benedict and book. But she gets lost because this temple doesn't have straight lines anywhere. She has no idea how to get out. But Raoul had been pissed off enough to follow her into the fire, because how dare she get herself into trouble, and who would take care of him when she gets killed, and who's going to rub his ears exactly the way that he likes. And he appears and says, "You are rude, and the smoke is in my nose so that I could not track, which is also your fault, and we must leave." And he's able to guide her out enough.
It's very rude. Very inconsiderate, even.
Extremely.
Imagine if one were to get permanently disfigured to a point where you would have to jump off the side of the spire or the boat. Like you just nothing to be done. You're done. You're
Permanent
over. It's
horrific
over.
disfigurement. Chapter 60 gets we go back to Grimm, and Kettle is saying, I don't like it, go running to a fire like that. She's not some helpless schoolgirl. She's one of the Spire Guard, for all that she's like 17 and has had training for a month. But she's a farm girl, therefore superpowers.
Worked for Superman ever since. So
Yes, it did. And Grimm and Kettle are discussing of how much they do not like that she went in there alone, and they do desperately want to help, but no, Grimm is not going to order anyone into the fire of a burning building. That's insane. And so Kettle says, it'll be just you and me, Skip. And they're about to run in. When they start hearing the incendiary charges that are going off elsewhere. Because the incendiary charges are used often on the airships in air-to-air battle, because it's devastating to set one of them on fire, and so they recognize the sound. Yeah, and how dangerous that it would be inside the Habel. Okay, and as they're like feeling conflicted as whether they go help the rest of the Habel or they try to help Bridget and Benedict, Bridget helpfully wanders out of the smoke enough to collapse and get more help. And Bridget is intelligent enough before she collapses fully that she gives the book to him and says, this is for the Spire Arc. And then Folly basically takes over care for Bridget while Benedict is put on a stretcher. Right. But this is when Folly learns that something is wrong with Ferris, because as they're saying, okay, the Silkweaver venom is the problem with Benedict and a bunch of other people. They need to get him back to Ferris, but Ferris is out of commission right now because he had all of his stuff taken away by Cavendish. And she's like, what did he say? Did something happen? And Cavendish visited. She offered to trade your lives for Master Ferris's collection, and he agreed. And oh, that is not good at all. That was filling a rather large hole. Where are the wagons now, I wonder? Cavendish took them, Grimm says. The odds are excellent that she had them thrown off the shipyard platform immediately after. And Folly is surprised because he is a very good captain, but that would seemingly make a very poor gambler. The wagons are actually moving down a street toward the shipyard. The puppet lady probably expects to riddle out some kind of pattern that would give her an advantage in future encounters, because Folly has the ability to sense where those wagons are because she has hid some of her crystals inside it to be able to find them.
I did not make that connection before, but either way, it's a very useful thing for an apprentice to be able to do,
Yeah.
So
she gathered it for Ferris, so she was able to have a connection of exactly what he needed and what it should be, and she probably just stashed some of her crystals there.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually what they should start doing, is making like little bolt holes of crystals and random objects in each of the Habels and each of the sections of the spire all the way down, so that no matter where they go, somebody wants to steal his shit, he has a backup.
I mean, they're lumen crystals, right? So I think they're already more or less everywhere. So the specialness is, their quirks and stuff. But yeah, it's like theoretically I could just see him like ripping the lights out of the sconces, basically, just wherever he goes. But none of them are as big as a child's heart, though. So
no, that's the special one for his cane.
Yeah.
And probably was a child's heart. All
right. As this group that was trying to save the Habel and the temple is running back to the Predator because they realize that something is up with the Aurora Marines and they're chasing Cavendish, we get a good description of, even though this was a very sudden attack and fire is really bad, somehow the chaos is not as chaotic as it should have been because somebody had been forewarned. And Grimm puts it together that it was the crime guilds that were putting things together, making orderly fixes to the fires and the chaos, and putting people in order. And who could have possibly warned them that something big was going to happen? It must have been Spirarch himself. Right. And Grim arrives to the port just in time to basically watch the Mist Shark firing at all of the ships in order, with the last one being the Predator. And he sees the explosion, and he sees like smoke, and the Predator is gone. And he thinks that he has now watched the Predator vanish into dust and down to the surface. Going backwards in time just a little bit, we can see from Gwen's point of view of trying to get everything in line just in time for as they are about to be shot at by the Mist Shark, and getting the lift crystal up and running and the shroud up and running, and everything is falling apart. And she can only do it so fast, but if she's not fast enough, then they're all dead. And then she learns what a battle harness is, because she hadn't seen one yet before, and they have to strap her into everything as well. And as awkward as that is, they can hear the other ships exploding as the power cores got hit by something. They think it was one of the pikers that was a few ships down.
You can tell it was one of the pikers because it was a very small explosion. So
Yeah, and probably that little piker ship down at the far end. All right. So Journeyman had got her hooked up, says you need to have 3 lines on your battle harness so that you don't fall around and get hurt, and just stay out of my way. I wouldn't dream of it otherwise, but she is exactly in his way at all times. Anyway, Journeyman wants to turn on the shroud and basically start firing, but Gwen is clever enough to realize that if they do that, if they act like they're completely intact and normal and can fight, then the Mist Shark's just going to fight them even harder. So they need to drop to pretend that they've been injured. So they have to sit there and be not a threat before they get fired at anyway. But one of the wires that conducted current from the Hazlitt's cage is loose, and it's not connected correctly. And if it's not connected, then the ship is going to rip itself apart. And so Gwen unclips her safety lines and lunges for it and tries to put it together just in time. And it does work. She has her hand on the wire, and it is connected when he flips the switch and he starts running power, and therefore fries her hand. Not terribly bad, but it puts her out of commission for a while too. Chapter 62. Go back to Grim, and we get to see Grim processing his grief as he has seen the Predator disappear.
Predator will return in Olympian Affair Endgame.
It will return in about 10 seconds.
How dare you spoil that for the loyal viewer listener?
The entire shipyard has been destroyed, and that's going to absolutely wreck Haba Landing economically, as well as now they have no place to get on and off a ship. Not really, if the ship was even there. And Kettle's trying to get Grim to come away from the opening and not like be so close to a sheer drop to the surface. But he not really listening.
it's because he's thinking about joining Predator. So
Yeah. But then he gets angry at Kettle and says, precisely what are you suggesting? And Kettle's just go, nothing. And then he gets up and he turns away from the opening and to speak to everybody else and says, we've seem to have done all the damage we can. I'm not sure what my accounts will look like after paying the death benefits to the families of the fallen. And on, let's see, like the experience hands will certainly be needed in the weeks to come. I think none of you should be lacking for paying work as they're getting onto other ships in the fleet and something else. And Kettle goes, Skip? He says, not now. And we will locate Dr. Baggett, Mr. Creedy, and then deal with the wounded as much as we can. And then Folly's like, oh my goodness. And Grimm has continued, Kettle, please delegate a crew of 4 to assist the good doctor in relocating the men to a hospice of some sort. And then Bridget, just blinking and looking past him, says, Captain Grimm, I'm fairly new to this sort of thing, but we ought to get onto your ship. Because he's been facing away from them. They've been facing behind him.
This is such a cliche trope that it hurts. But it still works. Good. Yeah, it still works. But it's such a cliche, right? Like there's no getting around that. But it works.
Jim built it so that it makes a lot of sense. That like they didn't do it just for drama. They did it to survive. And the drama is a wonderful side effect. And he has to deal with all of his emotions in a very short amount of time. And he's not willing to turn around, but he sees all the rest of their faces. And then he stiffens his spine into proper alignment, adjusted his hat, and turned very calmly. And rising up out of the mist, no more than 100 feet from the opening, the wall of Haba Landing was the absolutely beautiful, entirely flawless, pristine, and very real shape of the Predator. And Grimm is crying, but he refuses to let anybody else to see that. And then he bellows at Mr. Journeyman. And Journeyman says, Skipper, there you are. Grimm is like, you, what have you done to my ship? So, begging the captain's pardon, sir, but we got her all hooked up and took her for a test dive. It seemed like the thing to do. A dive on lift and trim crystals alone with no pilot, because the pilot is Kettle and Kettle is right next to Grimm. And so if they did anything more than up or down, they would probably have veered into the wall of the spire. And so Grimm asks, well, how'd she do? And Journeyman says he could use some fine-tuning. And Grimm says, very good. And should you ever do a reckless and muzzle-headed thing with my ship again, there will be hell to pay, Journeyman. Am I clear? Predator is not your personal play toy placed there by God in heaven for your amusement. Journeyman says, no, sir. All right, now get my close-in ship enough to throw some lines so we can belay you and get that planks down. And as they get to go up into Predator and therefore keep moving towards the fight, Grimm confirms with Folly again that she can find the location of Master Ferris's collection. And she says it's moving away from the spire rather rapidly. That horrible puppet woman has them on that ship, the Mist Shark that they had seen. And they can follow. If the Master's collection doesn't get too far away from us, I believe I could follow them. All right. Grimm gives a good, like, we have to go to war, short little speech. I mean to take the Predator after Mist Shark because they need the thing to be able to put Ferris back to action, and Ferris is the only person who can save all the Silkweaver venom. Given the losses we've taken, we'll be running short on hands, but make no mistake, we will speak with our cannon nonetheless. Any man who wishes to stay behind will not be censured, and no one chooses to stay behind. Grimm tries to get Bridget to go with some of the men to go in the care of a hospice, and she refuses and demands to be with Benedict on the ship. And so Folly takes her on that ship. He says, if you're going into battle, you have no training or experience that would make you useful to our cause. The decision is not yours to make whether you're going to be on the ship or not. And she says, I'm certain that you can have me beaten until I can't walk onto it, but is that what you intend to do? And calling his bluff. Of course, he's not going to do that. And so he bails.
She's a solver, you know?
Something about sheep being stubborn, I think Tavi said. Although I don't know if
a sheep.
Sheep.
Yeah. What's a sheep? That's what Bridget said. So
yeah. Some
That's
terrifying surface creature.
Right.
That's like what the meat, one of the things the meat vat is based on.
mean, that's
tastes like sheep. How would you know?
right. That's a fair point. Like, does vat meat taste like any one animal, or does it taste like a bunch of animals, or none of them, or
It tastes like chicken. Everything tastes like chicken,
right?
except for chicken, which, of course, tastes like duck. That was that scene in The Matrix, right? Like when
course,
maybe
yeah.
that's why everything tastes like chicken, because the machines got it wrong, and they thought, well, okay.
Just throw everything in there and like the algorithm sorted. That's chicken. There we go. They'll never know the difference. They don't know.
So, Grim and Creedy have a short conversation. Grim says, next payday, schedule a bonus month's pay to Mr. Journeyman and his engineering team. And he said, okay. It was the Miss Shark that they're going after. And Creedy says, okay, we're short on crew. We're going to be light on guns. Miss Shark is larger and more heavily armed than Predator. And Grim's like, yep, uh-huh. And Creedy's like, okay, what are my orders? And get the wounded aboard and secured, then report to me on the bridge. But Creedy goes like, if the Miss Shark is already away, how do we catch her when she's known to be the fastest thing in the sky? And that's when Grim starts smiling.
Yeah, because her top speed's about warp 2 right now. So,
yeah. Grim felt his mouth stretch into a wolfish smile. Because, of course, it's wolfish.
Right.
All right. And as they are away, chapter 63, in Folly's perspective, she finds the whole thing of the ship rousing herself to life a little bit disturbing. Because from Folly's perspective, the ship is its whole etheric entity. It has its own personality and voice and everything. And as not in commission as it has been, she hasn't really had an interaction with Predator for real until now. And Predator says, peace, child. I have no quarrel with you today and much more interesting prey to consider. And Polly says, oh, pray do not let me distract you. And somebody that's walking by just like, okay, and walks away.
Oh, at this point, she's got the easy out. She talks to a jar of crystals. So what's a ship on top of that?
Right.
And Grim and Kettle and everyone are so excited to, now that Predator has all of these new crystals installed, she's moving rather well. And Folly can feel Predator's sense of pride and joy and a sudden sense of love so palpable she felt tears filling her eyes, and it's Predator's love of her crew.
This is when it became like One Piece.
Why? Because they're on a ship and they're searching for something?
And the ship's got a spirit and it talks. Well, I mean, that's really only shown the first ship. And then that ship gets destroyed.
I don't remember that. I don't know. Maybe I didn't.
Well, that wasn't. I don't know how much of the anime you've seen, but that was not in the live action.
I couldn't handle the anime, so I just read it because I could read faster than I could watch it, and I stopped at around 250 something chapters, and I'll pick it up at some point again.
Yeah, it might not have been that soon. Since we're up to like chapter 11,
yeah,
20 or something. Nonsense.
All right. Folly is on the bridge with Grim. She says, it's like seeing a caged bird suddenly fly. You never really saw it until then. And he's happy to have her there because he wants directions from her, and Creedy has to get her a harness. Even though they're just flying for right now as they're going into battle, she needs a battle harness. And Grim is about as ecstatic as he could possibly be going into battle with his fully revitalized ship, and Folly is watching all of this, and it's the the way that it looks was they're flying on the etheric currents is very pretty, and there's a really good description of it all and the colors and everything. And Grimm says, "It's a pleasant view. I never get tired of it. Do you, Kettle?" And Kettle just starts laughing. So of course, he never gets tired of it either. And Folly says, "Oh, I see it now. Predator is you, and you are she." And Grimm looks at her like, "Are you addressing me?" Because he's learned that she can't do that. She has to talk to her crystals. And she says, like, "Yes, Captain, I can. When here, you are appropriate." Not that that explains anything. And Predator
You're
says,
a hunk of
"Precisely."
wood, and I can talk to you now.
Yeah. Predator says, "Precisely, child. Those are my feelings on it. Precisely. It's just okay." Grimm's very confused, but he just goes with it. "Then I hope you will find it not too inconvenient if I ask for a bit of guidance. I need to know where the Miss Shark is in order to catch her." And Folly says, "I couldn't possibly tell you that. I can only tell you where the Master's collection is. That will suffice."
Right.
That works.
That'll get us within,
You know what? Let's roll with that.
right.
So Folly kind of focuses on where is the collection, and she sees like a star of like red and something and puts it in view. And she points her finger to the left and at an angle upward. And Grimm says she's running for the blue. She'll want to stay hidden at the edge of the mist until she can get out of Albion's defensive carousel, I expect. 2 points to port, and let's match her ascent. Kettle is saying, "Well, you got her pretty good." Like he had guessed where it was, where the Miss Shark was going to be. It's like, "Yeah, I know her well." It's like, "Then you'll know that she'll have some kind of trick on hand, right?" And Grimm says, "This time, Kettle, I struck first." And then Kettle's confused, and Grimm says, "I sent Mr. Stern aboard Miss Shark a while ago. He painted the inside of their Hazlitt cage with what was left of that stew I almost cooked in the galley the other night." And so all those connections that make the energy run are going to burn, and the char is going to destroy the connections, and therefore they can only get to warp 2.
Right. Yeah. It's going to hurt the efficiencies, if nothing else. So, yeah.
And probably make the stew taste better.
True.
Grease and other organic material cannot conduct power. The closer you move the cage, the more current flows into it, the hotter it gets. Folly is trying to follow. It's like it's going to burn the soup. It's burn it black, burn it to baked jelly and soot. Right. And Kettle is having a field day with this. He says it's going to play merry hell with their power distribution, put a huge strain on their system, reduce the power being conducted to Miss Shark's web by maybe a 10%. It's the same trick that bit. And Grimm looks at him and says, "A big bunch of cheaters pulled on us at the Olympian air trials. It's the only reason that they beat us." And so now that it's the same trick, Grimm's got that up his sleeve and he can try to catch them.
What goes around comes around.
And
Right.
sometimes you are what comes around.
Yes. I also like the fact that it's like they know in excruciating detail what's happening because it happened to their ship. So, you know.
Yeah.
All's fair in love and stew.
Okay. So it's going to take some time. Once it sets in, they'll overhaul Miss Shark quick enough. Until they do, Grimm says, "We'll need you to stay here, Folly, to help guide them." But Folly doesn't want to be there. She wants to be with Ferris. And so she talks to Predator and, "Can you hear me?" He's like, "Yes, of course." "And do you see this red glowy thing that I'm putting up on your etheric web?" "I do. Why are you showing it to me, child?" It's like, "Well, that's the ship that we're hunting. And can you show it to the others?" And Predator doesn't understand that the others can't see it like Folly can. And she says, "Oh, poor things. They mean well." She has the voice of Raoul, of like, what pitiful creatures are they that they cannot see glowing things that don't exist in reality. And then there's a glowing little dot halo on the etheric web, and Pilot is like, "Oh, what's that? Okay." And Grimm was like, "This is Folly. Is this your doing?" "Oh, well, yes. Well, no, not precisely. I asked Predator to show you where the Master's collection is." And then there's a small pause, and Kettle goes, "What?" Predator says, "You must forgive them. The dear things are blind and almost deaf, except for my captain, of course. He hears me better than all but a few, like yourself." And Folly responds like, "I'm sure they try very hard, confusing everyone around her." And Predator can guide you now that she knows what to look for. And may I go to the master? And Grim says, "As you wish. You are dismissed."
Okay, bye.
Okay, Kittle, follow that star.
And then it became Peter Pan. Second star to the right and straight on till Hebel Landing.
I was actually talking about Peter Pan with some friends the other day, and I was like, it's kind of mean how the boy drips the magic flying stuff on the dog, and then it can just hang there and see them fly off. Like, I hope it doesn't choke.
Have you ever read the original Peter Pan? Because
I've only watched.
Peter's a dick.
Like, if you read between the lines on a lot of his stuff, even in the cartoons and other stuff like that, like
he's terrible in the cartoons, but he outright kills the Lost Boys in the original, and that's what the pirates are. They're Lost Boys who escaped and grew up, but he kills them before they can grow up.
So they can't become pirates?
No, so they can't grow up. They just became pirates as a result of that, because they found out what he was doing and tried to escape.
I don't know if
pirates are the good guys.
But there's no good guys. Probably, the Lost Boys are mostly innocent, but yeah, I don't know if it's the latest adaptation, but one of the more recent ones, they lean into that pretty heavily. That it was I think it was Jude Law was Captain Hook, right? And it was they basically covered the fact that it's he used to be a lost boy, so they left
they also
and
do
grew
that
up
in the
and
Robin
came back.
Williams version.
I mean, it's heavily implied in a lot of that stuff, but it's never this was much more kind of outspoken, where he and Hook have a conversation about it, from what I remember. Whereas
it was spelled out a lot more overtly originally, and then it became subtext.
Yeah. And then Hook is Peter Pan left and had his happily ever after ish, but then came back and then kind of realized, that's how that all works. But it kind of skips over the whole implication of him, murdering other Lost Boys and, stuff like that, like EG was saying. I haven't read the original, so I don't know that deep, but, it's definitely there. So
a lot of all those old stories. I mean, Pinocchio, they tried to kill him because he's a demon puppet. They hung him and stuff. That's
does it count as
demon
killing
puppet?
Him though?
Listen, they're German. I don't know what you want from me. Ask Andreas.
Yeah. I'm just saying there was one guy, the evil got in his hand, so he had to chop it off. I feel like that's a pretty reasonable, reaction to that. So
yeah, but then he got to put a chainsaw on it, so it's a win-win.
True. Yeah.
You don't have to deal with an evil hand, and you get a chainsaw.
Right. So, chapter 64, Bridget wakes up with a headache. She's on the floor in the infirmary on the ship of the Predator, and trying to remember what happened and why she's in pain. And she kind of vaguely remembers that there was a disaster, and she's worried about Benedict, and she tries to sit up too fast and hurts herself. And Gwen is right next to her, trying to get her to calm down and just be easy. And then Bridget looks at Gwen and sees that she's wearing men's clothing that is way, way, way too large for her. She has grease and soot, perhaps on 2/3 of her face. Her right hand is so thickly wrapped in bandages that cannot be seen as anything but a lump. And her hair, beneath another stained bandage, resembled spreading wings of an airship's charged ether silk web standing on all ends. Bridget says, "You look awful." And they have to share stories as to how they injured themselves. I learned that one ought to be extremely cautious when connecting live wires during free fall.
Yeah, see, that's the thing when you don't have running electricity and you can't be taught as a child, don't stick your finger in a light socket. When everything runs by etheric crystals, what are you going to touch? Nothing.
I mean, she didn't know the risks. She just chose to be injured instead of...
She was hoping to gain superpowers through lightning. She was fast.
It was that or the ship splatters to smithereens 2 miles down. I'd take my chances.
Yeah.
Maybe she'll be quicker next time.
Yes. Let's see. So Gwen is asking Bridget, and how are you? It's like, I feel ill and my leg hurts. Dr. Backen doesn't think your injuries are life-threatening. I'm afraid you'll have to wait the longest to be seen. Sitting sounds quite agreeable at the moment. And where is Benedict? He is on a pallet on the other side of the table, and he is unconscious. Well, that's good because it means that he's alive, but is he stable? Less than ideal. Like several of the crew has been poisoned by silkweaver venom, like Gwen just got over. Yeah, and they realize that, I mean, if he doesn't get seen by Ferris, as this point has been driven home quite a lot, he is dying because they need to go get the collection for Ferris. All right. And then there's something moves the ship a little bit, and Bridget doesn't know what it is because she hasn't been on a airship that is actually moving more than just kind of floating downward softly. And Gwen has to explain that it's a crosswind. They are underway in pursuit of the mist shark and have been for nearly 2 hours. And so Bridget realizes that means that there's no spire underneath her. She has a couple of wooden planks and then empty air and 2 miles down to surface. Probably more than that at this point. And the stress of it all overwhelms her, and Bridget starts crying, and Gwen is trying to like pat her head. There, it's not so bad. And Captain Grimm is quite confident we can bring the mist shark to battle. And Bridget says, yeah, okay, but I'm going to cry a little bit anyway. And so Gwen rips off a piece of her too big shirt and like presses it into Bridget's hand, and that makes her cry even more. And they bond about how they don't really know how to have friends, and as they're making friends. Very meta. And so Gwen gives Bridget a battle harness and makes her strap in, and that's a very good thing. And then as things are a bit more tricky, Bridget's like, what about Raoul? He's too small for a standard battle harness because he's a cat, and so how is he going to stay strapped in? Baggin is in the room and says, no, there's nothing that's small enough, and we can't have that little blighter flying around the infirmary. And so the bells start ringing, and they're doing maneuvers, and so Bridget tries to grab Raoul, and he's also incapacitated, and so he's very slow moving. Yeah. And he tries to leap right when the ship lurches, and then it cuts to a different chapter, just so you're hanging in the balance.
And thus, horror struck. This is where he will be horribly disfigured.
But we don't get to know that for quite a while.
Listen, everyone has a pretty rough go of it, this book.
That is his standard pattern, yes. All right. On the Mist Shark, chapter 65. We're making great progress today. Espira is trying to deal with his own hopelessness on a ship because he is a Marine and he cannot do anything in terms of making an airship run faster or better. And he's also trying to deal with his own guilt of having set a Habel on fire or killing a 14-year-old boy or any of the other things he's had to do in the proximity of Cavendish. And then Syriaco appears and says, she wants to see you in her cabin, sir. Ah, of course she does, because, yeah.
Those two's friendship really grows on me further on in the series.
For bad guys, they're pretty great. So,
yeah. And even in this book, I mean, they're the antagonists. They're on the other side of the good guys, but they don't feel like bad guys. You have a lot of sympathy for them.
The 14-year-old boy attacked civilian targets. He's a pretty bad guy. He's just not also a dick. I mean, personally, he's relatable. Sure, fine, you betcha.
He's done
as
some
a Marine, pretty despicable.
I mean, yes and no, right?
Attack civilian targets. That's pretty much the bottom of the barrel, my dude.
He's been ordered to do it, right? Like you can't disobey orders, right? That's not a thing you can do.
Listen, civilians are just future soldiers if given enough time. So it's really being proactive.
Okay, here's the lawful evil take. So
happy to oblige.
Yeah.
I mean, I'm just saying that they seem like decent folk who are in a bad situation doing something bad. More like it's the a villain's never the villain in his own mind, right?
Sure. I think he's starting to think he might be the villain, though. So that's the problem.
Are we the bad guys?
Are we the bad guys?
Yeah. Like, absolutely entirely different, even though the Lancasters are a civilian target. They're kind of a military target because they're supplying crystals to the fleet, right? So,
it's like bombing some sort of weapons manufacturing plant, right?
Well, it would be like bombing Ford during World War I or two, I think would be more appropriate. If you bombed, Henry Ford and his factory,
sure,
you could easily make the argument that's a legitimate target.
Sure. Yeah, so that's what I'm saying is like you could make the arguments for some of these targets, right? Burning down a library filled with monks, killing all of them, burning down.
That's just a bonus.
Right. So burning down a glorified mall, and their economic center, stuff like that. Like those are all civilian targets. So that's where he crossed the line. Anyway.
Yeah. So Aspira, who's struggling with his consciousness now, it arrives to Cavendish's cabin and raises his hand to knock, and she says, "Come in, Major," before he even touches the door because she's creepy. And she's sitting inside at her small tea table, but she has her gown's bodice unfastened and hanging down to her waist because she was injured, and the Mistark's doctor, a wiry piker covered in outlandish tattoos, was tying off a bandage that was around her ribs. It left an unseemly amount of skin on display, and Aspira is forcing himself not to look at that skin. It would not do to permit himself to think of Cavendish as a woman. She was a monster. Because, of course, he has that gallantry issue.
And she had just demoted him again. So.
Right. Yeah. I mean, to be fair, like, she is actually a monster. Not just she's done monstrous things. She's like,
Yeah, quite truly.
Yeah. Right. Like, yeah, like the torturing people to death, that's monstrous. But she's like actually a monster. So.
Yeah. And she's still reading the book with unnervingly steady attention, even as the doctor is ministering at her. And there's a bunk bed in the room. The lower berth had clearly been reserved for Cavendish. The top had been occupied by the bags of miscellaneous objects she had insisted upon bringing aboard, Ferris's collection. And it took Aspira a moment to notice that Sark was in the room. He is bandaged and wounded, but the warrior-born isn't on one of the bunks or sitting anything. He's laying on the floor beneath the bunks, just staring out from under it like a very creepy monster.
He's totally a kind of guy who would sniff your feet.
Jesus Christ.
I was going to go with the monster under the bed thing, but sure, you can go that way.
Gross.
But he just has that vibe. That makes sense to me. He's under the bed.
You Europeans. I may say the old world is more civilized.
Truly, across the pond here, we are superior in every
way.
Well,
it makes a certain sense because what the hell else are you going to do in Finland?
Just get the country right, just 1 out of 10 times or something.
Have you guys considered getting longer blankets? I don't know. Like, there's like a dozen things I could think of that would preclude this from being a reasonable fear.
Slippers.
Next, he's going to tell me he's afraid of like actual quicksand or something. Like,
they don't have sand in his country.
That's true. That's why it's so terrifying. Oh my God, sand, and it's quick.
I will have you know, we have a desert-ish thing.
Is it made of sand?
Right. In the same sense, like Antarctica is a desert because of a lack of
Right,
rainfall.
exactly.
We have like this small. I'll see if I can find it. I can link to you
Sandbox
after.
somewhere.
Right.
It's like a local attraction. All the kids go and poke it with sticks, but they don't actually step in it for fear of being drawn in by the sand.
Right. It's community-sized sandbox.
It's a substance they're unfamiliar with, so they just go and kind of like look at it, but they don't ever touch it.
Yeah.
Right. So Cavendish insists that Aspira do sit down and ignore the doctor. Aspira says, "How can I be of service?" And she asks, "I need your professional assessment. How quickly can your men seize the ship?" And the doctor just freezes. Hypothetically speaking, of course. Aspira has to give an answer. She wanted the doctor to hear this answer clearly. "The crew is outnumbered and outgunned, and my men are the best. On the other hand, we don't know what measures the crew has put into place to even the odds in such an action. But I'm confident to say that my men could take the ship 8 or 9 times in 10. Well, that's excellent news. And Cavendish says, "Doctor, are you finished? Would you please leave now and go report back to Ransom?" Okay, that should heal up fine. He's saying to Cavendish as he's trying to leave, "Can't see the ball, tore off any bone off the ribs, so no splinters. Clean it twice a day, fresh bandages each time, and don't go jumping about." And Cavendish says, "You will tend to it, doctor. I will see you after breakfast and after dinner. Plan accordingly." Because she gets to give orders like that. And he doesn't like that, and he resents it, and then he leaves. And Aspira waits for him to leave, and then there's a Cavendish and says, "Why?" And she says, "The pace is too slow. If that does not change, we may not reach our escort before Albion's fleet catches up to us. I notified Captain Ransom of this fact several times and received no reply. I do not care to be ignored." And then she offers tea. And then asks him to button up her dress because now she can't do it. He says, "It would be my pleasure." And then she says, "It had best not be." Mixed signals here.
Right.
"You are now my lady in waiting. You are not my consort."
And so they sit down and they have tea. And a moment after that, the door opens abruptly and Calliope Ransom strides in. And she is quite angry and has her bandoliers of all of the pistols and blades. And Cavendish offers her to join for tea. And Ransom says, "No, thank you. This is my ship. And while you are valued customers, you are guests on my vessel. And by God in heaven, you will comport yourselves as such. Or what follows, as you will leave the ship." And even if she doesn't like kick them overboard, they have blasting charges underneath the cargo hold that they are in to be able to blow them out from under. And she never needs to try to leave them, haul them out. And if Ransom doesn't leave the cabin in the next 10 minutes, Santos, her first mate, is going to set off the charges. If I emerge from the cabin acting odd or out of character, he sets off the charges. If he so much as gets a bad feeling that you're up to something, he has orders to set off the charges and kill you all. And Aspira thinks that Ransom is bluffing. And
He's good at falling for her bluffs.
It's like, have you met who I'm married to?
Also, she has a type.
I mean, most of the characters have a type, I suppose.
Does she have a type? I don't know. Maybe. Cavendish also wonders aloud if Ransom is truly the kind of person who would rig the guest quarters to murder the guests should they become inconvenient. And Ransom fires back, like, "I wonder if you were the sort of person who would make extremely foolish threat simply to get her extremely busy host attention." But touche, Cavendish said, could she not have taken a moment to be polite and speak with her guest? Polite is lovely for tea parties, but they're on the run from the fastest ship in the sky. And Ransom is willing to admit that because she knows what's happened to her ship.
Because when you're married to Han Solo and he has the Millennium Falcon, you give him his due.
Fair. And Ransom says, yes, the Marines might be able to take the ship, but something you should consider when calculating whether or not you can survive is that they are not aeronauts. They do not know what to do with the ship, even if they can take control of it. They do not know how to make it maneuver in the best way. And so if they want to survive, they need to let Ransom and her crew manage the Mist Shark.
You just got to say a bunch of hoist the sails and man the gibbet, and then the
But
ship does the rest.
Who's doing the gibbet and the hoisting? It's those guys that got to know.
No, the
how to...
ship does it.
Oh,
You say it, and the ship just does it. Now that we know the ships talk, I mean,
So yeah, but here's a good question. Folly can talk to Predator. Why can Cavendish not talk to Predator or to Mist Shark?
Maybe she doesn't care.
I was going to say, I would imagine that she doesn't stoop so low as to talk to she barely stoops so low as to talk to real people. She thinks they're inanimate objects.
Right. So she has some. I mean, so Ferris and her, they basically say she cannot do the foresight, future seeing thing that Ferris can.
Sure.
So she is also incapable of talking to entities the way that Folly can. Is that Folly's superpower and Cavendish's
we
weakness?
don't know. Yeah. I feel like there's some powerful assumptions there, and it's possible. Like, you're not necessarily wrong. But yeah, we don't know.
I mean,
because she can talk to some other things.
Or she can be talked to. She may not be the one managing that kind of connection.
Think about the the spiders, right? So, and some other stuff. So some of this gets expanded on in book 2 that, I'm trying not to talk about, but
right. But Cavendish would not need to have gone about this way with Ransom if she could have talked to Mist Shark directly, like Folly can.
Well, and it also begs the question, just because the ship has an emergent personality, does that mean that it's got some kind of automation? Like, Predator seems to need and treasure her crew. Can she operate independent of them?
Well, and how much of that has to do with the fact that it's got this super old, super powerful crystal, which is probably more where that's coming from than.
But no, they just swapped out the crystals and
but not the original one. Not the big
crystal.
main one.
Yeah, the power crystal is ancient. The lift crystal is brand new.
Yeah, the thing that makes Predator so special, and everyone's like, this should be in the fleet, is because of that 10,000-year-old thing, or whatever it is.
And an interesting tidbit, which I caught while you were talking about it earlier, is that Folly had been on the ship before and hadn't talked to Predator. So was Predator dormant while the repairs were going on?
Yeah, something like.
Is Predator an emergent property of all of the connected systems, or is it really does it more or less live in the power core, or is it the power core?
Yeah,
much
Predator
like I live in my skull.
It struck me as kind of a vaguely Alara type thing, where it's like it's this big old whatever. And while I could see someone like Folly being like Tavi, where she would pay attention to a little fury and a blade of grass or something, and Cavendish might only care about the big giant volcano one that could help her.
Sure.
I don't think this is a common necessary thing. I don't think we're going to necessarily see too many ships that can do this. And yeah, there's that.
Right.
I think Mist Shark could easily just be like, no, fuck you. Who the hell are you talking to me?
Yeah. Don't fucking talk to me. I'm busy. Yeah. Instead of I'm chasing other prey today, like Predator would be. But yeah, I mean, there is it would make a lot of sense that an age or experience component would be into it or whatever. But I've got a bunch of questions along those lines. And then I've got tinfoil theory that I took notes on earlier too about that, because it's maybe it is part of the science and these guys have just lost that. Maybe the Lancasters are over there making babies and they don't even realize. I know, right? But they're just growing crystals and they just don't even realize they all have personalities. And to them, they're just equipment, but to an etherealist,
Well, yeah, imagine Folly walks into their, production line and she just, all the crystals just start lighting up and talking to her.
Is the screaming normal? Yeah, so.
All right. To finish up this chapter, Cavendish essentially demands explanations as to why things are running slowly and why they cannot speed things up. There's corrosion in the Hazlitt cage. And Ransom understands everything, and she's pissed off. It's causing irregular power flow. We have to back off on the throttle, or it's blowing out the runs and the relays. And Cavendish said, can it be corrected? It's like, well, not without taking it all off power to be able to clean it. And that takes hours, and they don't have time for that. They would only be able to... yeah, they'd only be able to use their basic wind sails if they did that. And that means that they would be too vulnerable and too slow. Wind-powered sails are efficient because they cost no energy. But the maneuverability from the etheric web is crucial. The way that Cavendish says that you saying that relying on sails creates too many variables. And Ransom puts it, I'm saying that it dispenses with too many options. So yes and no, the same point, but coming at different directions. And if they disassemble the cage, they'll have no sails, no web, no shroud, no weapons, and then they would never be able to do anything. Once they reach the rendezvous with the rest of their escort, they can repair the cage, because then they'll have an escort to screen them if the fleet were to catch up. But for now, she's lost time, and she basically insults Cavendish, like, I would have been out there doing everything to fix it if I wasn't here answering your stupid questions, and you should just be a guest and do nothing. And Ransom is stubborn enough that when Cavendish says, you are ill-mannered, Captain, Ransom says, feel free to leave my ship whenever you wish, you arrogant bitch. He doesn't ever want anyone to actually say the word. And because right there, a bell starts ringing at a frantic pace, and she runs out. And we get into some of an airship fight.
How much? What's our percentage now?
We're at 90%.
Yeah, we probably ought to cut it, because as much as I like it, it's just
in the middle of a chapter really hurts to end it.
Oh, it is the middle of a chapter. Okay.
Yeah, and it's just like, but it keeps going, so we've got like several more pages. I'll see if we can.
The fight, and then we're gonna have the aftermath. Basically right after. So.
Okay.
So. In short, they've been caught up by the Predator, and Ransom is pissed off. Like, how could they have found them so fast? Because even though they can move fast, how did they find them in the mist? Because Folly and Predator's tiny little glowing star.
Yeah.
And signaling rockets, and they're doing a firefighting party to the deck, and Ransom is saying guns fire at will, and Predator is still able to survive and fire back.
Poor Will. Never saw it coming.
He never does. You'd think by now.
Right. So Ransom says 20 degrees west, and they turn so fast that like a wooden keg that had not been properly secured bounced across the steeply angled deck and tumbles over the side. And Aspera asks, is this wise, Captain? And she says, no, put on your goggles.
Why is the rum gone? Just flew overboard.
Exactly. We can't force him to fight with half our web shot away. We're too slow on our feet. If we try it, we'll outmaneuver us, and they'll take out the rest of our web within minutes. Our only chance is to get to our escort before Grimm turns us into a barge.
He really is styling on them here, by the way. Like, really.
Oh, yeah. And Aspera says, Captain Grimm, there are a lot of people in Aurora who are coming to despise that man. And Ransom says, and to think they aren't even married to him. Okay, that's the end of the chapter.
Okay.
Good. So we are at 90% through, and we will start next time, chapter 66.
Yeah, and with some of the best chapters like in the series, and
So we're only going to get through
events.
93% is what you're saying. Next time.
No, I mean it's action packed, right? So that stuff just goes different, faster and stuff.
Boom,
but
pow,
but it is a lot of fun details and a lot of like when we get to the aftermath maybe. But I was just like, yeah, we're already 10 minutes over, and if we start the battle, we're gonna want to keep going. So
yeah, we cannot start the battle, but we're like, that's a good cliffhanger.
Yeah, for sure.
We did it. All right, Andreas, do something.
Do the thing.
Do the thing.
The thing.
The thing. I'm doing the thing. This has been an episode of While We Weren't Recording. We go live every Saturday at 5 p.m. GMT on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/at the Dresden Files Podcast. You can check us out there. Leave us a like and subscribe to us and leave a comment. That means the world to us. You can go to our Patreon at patreon.com/brokenjars. Use it. We use the money to pay for our hosting. You get access to our Discord where we have GIF wars that you can participate in.
GIF.
All right, you need
I
to
said
do another
GIF, right?
take with saying GIF and normal times for normal people.
5 p.m. GMT is the most normal. I googled this.
You Googled it on your government-accessed European server. What are you talking about?
We use Central European time.
Which nobody lives in.
Did I forget anything?
Yes.
Probably.
Other than a
GIF.
proper time zone, apparently.
And you called it GIF. It's not peanut butter.
I meant to say GIF, but
But you didn't.